Why do people do the baffling, often hurtful things they do? We're writers, we've been through it, and now it's time to learn from it and use it in our stories because this week I want to talk about the 12 psychological drivers for fascinating villains. So basically, this is one of the most impactful things you can wrap your head around in order to write a great emotional, plot driven story. As Tony Robbins says, the quality of the hero is completely shaped by the strength of the villain. And this is something I believe with all my heart. One of the reasons narrative is so wonderful is because it puts a protagonist against an antagonist, and that gives the story meaning. When you want something, when something means something to you and you have to fight for it, you have to protect it. You have to prove how much you will overcome in order to save this meaningful thing, then you've got a story. And so one of the important things to be able to really bring fascinating emotional depth to your story is to really understand your villains. One of the novel series that has done this with so much intricacy and psychological depth is the Game of Thrones. And really, this is what made it so successful. And so, in order to talk about these 12 psychological drivers that I think can be really useful for your writing, I want to get into a handful of characters from Game of Thrones and show how these different psychological complexes, mechanisms, as I say, drivers, really give your story more depth and more tension and more plot fuel. So let's start with Cersei Lannister. So the first driver I want to get into is the scarcity mindset. The scarcity mindset is what makes us fiercely competitive, and it often is fueled by the discomfort of comparing ourselves to others. And so if we look at Cersei Lannister, anyone who gains anything, anyone who gets attention is a direct threat to her. And she will do anything to control or manipulate them. So it's in this scarcity mindset that she forgets any empathy or any human connection, and she just keeps going for the gold, going for the gold. She will do anything in order to win the competition because basically herself doesn't exist without being better than or more powerful than someone else. So, first driver, understanding scarcity mindset. Second, she's got this backed up with a crazy heavy tendency towards projection. So, projection is when you either can't handle the discomfort of flaws and mistakes in yourself, and so you're constantly pushing it onto somebody else's plate. I think of it as making somebody else eat your vegetables. It's not doing any good for you, but you're not in a reflective place where you can learn from your mistakes, and so you just push them off your plate and put them onto somebody else. And so, what happens because of this in Cersei Lannister's case, and maybe for your villain too, is that she blames everyone for the situation. She's constantly pointing fingers and often completely blind to essential information that just makes the situation worse, makes more drama, and it spirals from there. So she's blaming others, and then she has a fierce protective blindness for her own flaws, and then that turns into rage. So those are two things for Cersei Lannister. She was my favorite villain. Scarcity mindset, projection. Don't do it, but put it in your stories. Okay, Tywin Lannister. The roots of Cersei Lannister are often in the hands of Tywin. So he has this sense of entitlement that really leads to moral licensing. So he doesn't care who he kills because his family deserves the power, deserves the land. So anything he's got to do to make sure he pins that down, he's going to do it because of this sense of entitlement. Next, perfectionism. this distances himself from his children. He doesn't have any empathy or connection to his kids because all they are to him are expectations, perfect expectations of what they should be and not who they are. So for Tywin Lannister, we're adding entitlement and perfectionism. And then we're going to go to Joffrey Baratheon. So I'm not doing all the villains because another great thing about Game of Thrones is that everybody's in the villain spectrum, which is also, you know, and this is a good point to bring up with Joffrey Baratheon, is all of us are on the villain spectrum. All of us have entitlement about certain things in our lives. We can project and make mistakes. We definitely can compare and have a scarcity mindset. And so it's interesting because one of the things I really loved about those books and that television series is that there is a very strong, powerful psychological spectrum of behavior. And so one of people's favorite villains, favorite for the badness and the chaos he causes is Jeffrey Baratheon. And I think if you can understand Joffrey and Ramsay, you can understand anybody. And so Joffrey, I want to highlight narcissism. So he has a very fragile ego. He really hasn't overcome anything in his life. He's always been put on this pedestal, which makes him very unstable. His narcissism needs a lot of approval, needs a lot of faith and worship of his abilities, no matter what, in order for him to stabilize this unstable pedestal he's been placed upon. So he enjoys dehumanizing others. This is sadistic, and we'll talk about sadism next with Ramsay Bolton. But he enjoys dehumanizing and hurting others because it stimulates his feeling of superiority. And so it helps give him a little emotional stability. So we have some traffic outside, but I live in a city, so we're just going to keep on going. So the root of his narcissism is the ability to prop himself up on the pedestal that he's been placed upon, that he places himself upon, that he uses instead of empathy. Next, so the connection between Ramsay Bolton and Joffrey is sadism, which is kind of the classic villain trope. So we don't know why he's so mean in, a lot of villains, but he just seems to love to do evil. This is how we could think about sadism, people who enjoy harming others. They actually get a thrill out of hurting people. So this is Ramsay Bolton. And one thing he and Joffrey have in common is they really do feel like they were born into some pretty deep insecurity. So Ramsay Bolton is the illegitimate son, and so he wants to, the root of his sadism, of his pleasure in harming others, is it flips the power dynamic. And so, yes, not only have there been a lot of sadists, Lex Luthors in villain history, but it's also this obsession with flipping the power dynamic that I came into a place where I don't feel powerful, which is true of Joffrey as well. And so I want to flip the power dynamic. And oh my God, when I flip the power dynamic by hurting somebody, that feels good to this villain. So understanding that will give you more psychological depth to the story. And so the same thing with flipping the power dynamic is manipulation. Cersei was a huge manipulator also because the manipulation makes people feel powerful, which gives them the illusion of control over all of their insecurities. So we've seen that power is at the root of a lot of villainy, and so is the illusion of control. Next on our list, I think I said this about Cersei, but I was wrong. This is my favorite villain, Littlefinger. He is a fascinating villain. So, number one driver of Littlefinger, the fascinating villain, is transactional relationships. So where some of us have relationships based on, connection, generosity, and all of these positive things in our life, if all of your relationships are only transactional, that kind of leads you into this selfish vortex where it's like, I have a relationship with you because you can do this thing for me. And so it's very selfish. All his relationships are transactional. He rationalizes and narrativizes his bad behavior. And so this allows him to morally bypass any harm he's doing others because everybody's in it for power. This is all just a game. And he becomes the ultimate social climber. We're on the ninth driver, which is rationalization and narrativizing. That allows our villains to morally bypass anything bad they did. 10, revenge script. This creates obsession. Revenge becomes a psychological obsession, and it's the obsession behind Littlefinger's rationalization and social climbing. So it's in the stories they have this early childhood wound because he was not wealthy. He got pushed out of love and other things, and he's been climbing up the wealth and social ladder ever since because of his revenge script. I'm going to show them. I'm going to get back at them. I'm going to push them under my thumb. And then finally, Stannis Baratheon and the Red Queen. So they have what I call the Stalin complex, where they have a utopian self righteousness. The ends justify the means. This is a really interesting villainous script, especially for dystopia, because your villain sees a utopia, sees an idea that is better than anything or anyone that currently exists, and therefore we can do anything in order to get there. This happened in the USSR, this happened a lot of places. And so we have the leader villain, ultimately self-righteous, and in this story, willing to burn people at the stake for their mission. And that's the final thing, selective altruism, or really at the core, it's just compartmentalization. I can cause this harm. I can burn these people because it's okay because of this bigger mission. And so often, the things our villains are doing, they're doing it because they've compartmentalized it in a specific place. So normal rules, normal ethics don't apply. So I hope I didn't scare you with my excitement of understanding villains, but I do think that when we have something that's meaningful to us and something we want to illustrate at an emotional level, oh my goodness, give us a good villain and make us fight for it, make us overcome those obstacles in order to get it. So, my friend, if you want to outline your entire book on one page, or if you'd like some prompts to help you write your book whenever you feel stuck, create that conflict, create those great villains, I have a freebie down below. Outline your book on one page and also the Rapid Novel Blueprint. It is available. So grab it. And every Friday, I'm coming back with more information about how to move forward with your novel. So much love. Talk soon.